Hello, I'm Robert Ellsberg. I'm the publisher of Orbis Books. I'm very glad to be joined today by a new Orbis author, new for us, named Amy Frykholm. Her book is Journey to the Wild Heart, Four Invitations to Contemplative Living. Amy Frykholm is an award-winning American writer, podcaster, journalist. She has published novels and poetry and at least a couple of religious books, including one on Julian of Norwich, and in a way, a forerunner to the present work, Wild Woman, A Footnote, a Desert, and My Quest for an Elusive Saint, which I am now, after reading this, particularly eager to read. So welcome, Amy. I have been very excited about this talk to you about your book. And if I may, I'd like to just begin by reading the first paragraph, which is, this book is an invitation to a journey on the rocky trail to contemplative living. If you've picked this book up, you're likely in search of a richer, fuller, deeper spiritual life. And you know that within you there is a wild heart that yearns for this life. Every pilgrimage, whether it is an interior soul searching, a stay-in-place retreat, or a pilgrimage to near and far places, sends us on a treasure hunt through our own souls. This book is meant as a guide for that hunt. Writing like this runs throughout it is just beautiful. And it certainly, I think, whets your appetite to engage in this treasure hunt. So right away, you make it clear that this is not a book for everyone. You have a certain kind of reader in mind. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the kind of reader you're addressing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It certainly is a reader who's oriented toward maybe searching more than finding, somebody who just has an appetite for the search and maybe a spiritual hunger of some kind that isn't answered as easily in their daily life as maybe they would wish. And so I think that it's a treasure seeking kind of book. And that treasure, of course, is an interior one, or it's one where the world meets the inner life, that kind of a quest. And so I think that is the kind of reader that I had in mind, one that, would already be like, ooh, that is intriguing to me. I want to find that.
Mhm.
Um, so my goal was to sort of take the reader on a treasure hunt. And
The word search brought to my mind very much Walker Percy.
oh, yeah,
In the beginning of the moviegoer, where he says, the search is what anyone would undertake if he were not sunk in the everydayness of his own life.
I
I'm
love
aware of the
that.
possibility of the search is to be onto something. Not to be onto something is to be in despair. And he also has this great idea that, let's say if you're walking on the beach and someone comes up to you and says, I have the answer to your question, if you don't actually have a question, that you're not interested in what they have to say. So when Jesus goes out and meets, these fishermen on come follow me, he sort of perceives that they have a question,
Yes,
desire for some deeper life. And that's what I
absolutely.
resonated with in
I
your book.
resonate with that too, and I resonate so much with that Walker Percy passage, and it's been with me all my life. I feel like the minute I encountered Binks in the moviegoer, I understood that like I wasn't alone in having that kind of craving and being led forward by it into my life, however my everydayness was taking shape.
What could you say? What do you mean by the wild heart? What does that mean to you?
Well, that phrase came from my exploration of Mary of Egypt.
Mm.
So, Mary of Egypt, eventually, as I studied this fifth century saint, I came to understand her as an archetypal wild woman. So, this kind of person who's out there ahead of us on the trail, looking, incredibly intuitive, deeply in tune with the earth, and also has a deep spiritual connection to God. And, maybe she lives in a cave, or I don't know, she's out there somewhere in our psyches. And we often, at least I found in my life, go looking for her, but finding her is far more difficult or elusive. And so that was the kind of beginning, is that idea, the archetypal wild woman. Where is that in the Christian tradition? Where do we have that? Why do we have that? And then I was led forward by this quotation from Rumi, where he is telling a story about a beggar and a king. And in the middle of that story, he says, the king says to the beggar, bring the live heart, bring the live heart. No, it's actually the king to the warrior. Bring
Mhm.
the live heart. If you bring me anything less than a live heart, I'm not interested in what you have. And so I took that phrase, the live heart, as being a really key one for this. It to me it signals a kind of aliveness in the world,
Mhm. Mhm.
an awakeness to what is happening right now around you and through you and in you and so on. So that for me was that wild heart. I put those two pieces together for this journey.
Well, connected with journey and searching, all very important word in your book is pilgrimage. And life as a kind of pilgrimage, which is not just being on the move, but a way of living that kind of imbues every experience and encounter with a kind of possibility or an opening to a deeper meaning. I love that also because it was, Dorothy Day is my kind of hero. Called her writing, her column was called On Pilgrimage, and it was about what does it mean to live, on pilgrimage or in a spirit of pilgrimage.
Yeah, I take that word, to mean all kinds of things. I mean, I'm really a big fan of the actual pilgrimage, the kind of thing where you like pack your bags and you go out and you're in search of something and you look, because I think that brings such an aliveness to the pursuit. But as I've done that in my life, I've also discovered that what I'm really looking for is that pursuit in everyday life. I want to be alive to what is going on now,
Mhm.
here in the ordinary. And so it's really for me a matter of being open to the ordinary and letting it transform you.
Mhm.
But also, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I'm having trouble finding that here in my everyday life. I'm going to go on the road. That's a very ancient Christian practice, and I think it's a really profound one and has really shaped the Christian tradition that we're all inheriting. And maybe we don't do it enough. Maybe we're tourists, We go
Mhm.
out to
Mhm.
snap pictures of things and look at them, but we
Yeah,
don't go out to sort of let the world in and let
yeah.
it change us.
Rather than just collecting the experiences or
Right, just
stories
collecting them.
we
Yeah,
can tell,
exactly.
and being open to change, to vulnerability, and even the obstacles that you meet along the path are part of the journey, is part of the experience.
And there's this wonderful passage from the ancient Christian tradition of pilgrimage where it's really harsh, but he says, I can't remember who says it, but any pilgrim who goes out into the world and comes back with a single penny in his pocket faces damnation. I mean, of course, it's a huge exaggeration, right? But it's that idea of like go out and spend it all. If you're hoarding and if you're keeping it to yourself, that's the wrong way. You're not going to find the wild heart if you're not spending it all out there on the road.
In a way, I mean, it's a kind of running frame of reference in the book is not only the story of Saint Mary, but of your pursuit of her. And you actually go on this a kind of pilgrimage or quest. I don't know if you came back with a penny in your pocket, but I
No,
wonder. I wonder if
no
how it
penny.
changed you, and if you
Yeah.
found things that you weren't looking for, that you didn't realize you were
Oh,
looking
I mean, it was quite a transformative experience and really led me to the heart of this book because, well, for one thing, because I was so concerned about not being a tourist on this road, somehow I needed to find an alternative method of travel, but I was going out to Egypt and to Jordan and to Israel and Palestine. These are places where, there are a lot of tourists. So the paths are well trod. I'm not like in some new territory. At the same time, not very many people were going in search of Mary of Egypt, so that made my pilgrimage, my quest, particularly, interesting, I suppose, or different, or forced me into some different practices. And one of the practices that's really important to Journey to the Wild Heart is that I practiced beholding.
Mhm.
So wherever I would go in search of Mary of Egypt, I told my mom, who was with me for the first part of my trip, that we would stop at the place where we felt most likely to encounter Mary of Egypt, however far that might be from any actual encounter of Mary of Egypt. And instead of, glancing like a tourist does, we would sit and behold that
Mhm.
place.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that really was actually a transformative experience at many points along the way. I remember being in Egypt in Alexandria and sitting to behold the place where perhaps Mary of Egypt was a street prostitute.
Mhm.
And so just sitting and being in that place and trying to imagine, using my imagination to sort of connect with what was that life like? What did it mean when the text says, oh, she sleeps in doorways?
Mhm.
Um, and so my answer to that was to just sit there, literally just sit there in the sun, in the heat, and just behold and see
Mhm.
where that would lead me. So I did that at several points along the way, many points, and so that became a core practice for me in my own spiritual life, that act of beholding.
Well, when you talk about beholding, where that's taking us really into the heart of the book, because that's one of the what you call four invitations to contemplative living, which are discover, behold, bewilder, and discern. So we jumped over discover, but the first one that I love the way you start off with Blake's image of a golden string that will lead us to heaven's gate, and especially how William Stafford interpreted that. Maybe you'd like to say something about that.
Yeah, this has been really crucial for me in my writing life. And I feel like this book is a combination of my creative work and my contemplative work, and they've come together in this book. And hopefully that will be true for readers and practitioners, people who engage it, because they'll find that their creative life and their contemplative life are coming together like that. But what I mean by discover was this practice that I find easiest to do through writing. And that is because, not because I'm a writer, although I'm sure that has something to do with it,
Right.
but because everyone I know has learned more or less to take up a pen or a pencil and put it on paper and has learned how to do that work of writing. And what Blake and what Stafford using Blake is teaching us is that every time we do that, every time we try to translate our experience into the written word, we are learning, we're discovering, we're growing every time we do it. No matter what it is that we think we're doing, we are in the practice of discovering ourselves, our environment, our world. And we can do that very intentionally, and any of us can do it. It's not a mysterious practice. Very simple.
Mhm. Well, say what William Stafford had to say about that.
Oh yeah, so William Stafford, oh, he says so many amazing things about this. But William Stafford says that every detail that we put down on paper, whether it be the sound of a lawnmower, or the crack you once heard in lake ice, or the jogger hurtling herself past your window, or for me right now, if I were to put down the American goldfinch that's right at my bird feeder,
Mhm.
it's the end of a golden thread. And we can follow that golden thread through our lives. We can follow it. We can ask it, where are you taking me? Where are you leading? And we can also, he says, pull too hard. And if
Mhm.
we pull too hard, we break the golden thread. Although, as one of my teachers pointed out, if we break the golden thread, we just have another end, right? We just have one more
Mhm.
end to follow. So it's not the end of the world. But he was cautious about that purposefulness, like, darn it, give me the answer, give me the thing, as
Mhm.
opposed to that following. And what he said was that the orientation for any reader or any writer is neutral, ready, susceptible to now.
Mhm.
I love that. To me, that is, that's a contemplative stance.
Mhm.
Neutral, ready, susceptible to now.
Mhm.
And then he also says that any impulse we have on this path of discovery, any impulse, is accepted and enhanced. So you don't have to worry about the quality. In fact, Stafford was a big one about, like, forget about the quality. He said there's no such thing as writer's block. If you have writer's block, lower your standards. Just let it go, right? Just don't. So that has become a really important part of my own, both my spiritual practice, and as I've taught this, I've understood more and more deeply that, oh, whenever I'm teaching writing, I'm actually also teaching spirituality.
Yeah, right.
And also whenever I'm practicing writing, I'm also practicing in a spiritual way. And so was Stafford, and I'm guessing so was Blake. So it's a long tradition of using this practice of writing as discovery to see what's going on.
It's very clear, especially in the second half when you get into your sort of exercises or what you call sessions, that writing and contemplative experience are very closely connected for you
Yeah,
as
I
a
really
writer.
couldn't do it any other way. Even my following of Mary of Egypt, my pilgrimage was for me a writing practice, even though obviously I was out in the world and doing stuff,
Mhm.
still a writing practice.
Well, it also brings. There were so many of my favorite writers that you refer to, spiritual classics like Jean-Pierre de Caussade's Abandonment to Divine Providence, where he is all about the present moment, and which he says is a sacrament, the sacrament of the present moment. And you talk about that in the kind of hidden treasure that is available to us in every encounter, everything we do, every moment, if we're awake to it. Um, but let's move on to beholding, which you already started talking about. You said that's the practice of being in the presence of something or someone and contemplating it, allowing your own reality to be penetrated by the reality of this other. And you demonstrate how you can begin just by peeling an orange. And
Yeah. Yeah, that image comes from that wonderful book called, what is it called? You got it in front of me. I got it in front of me too. What is it called? Why is it not coming to me? It's what's his name? Robert. I'm gonna go look in my little bibliography here and find it.
leave our listeners can look that up for themselves.
Yeah, oh,
But
it's Robert Farrar Capon. Sorry for that.
okay, yeah, oh yes,
Yeah, The Supper of the Lamb.
yeah.
And yeah, and so he was the one who taught me this, that beholding is a practice that can be also be active. It doesn't have to just be sitting and looking, although very often for me it is. But it can also be something like peeling an orange and paying attention to each aspect of that action, or cutting an onion. It's something that he recommends that a person do for an hour. How can you cut an onion for an hour? I mean, really, that seems so silly and ridiculous. And yet, as he shows you how it's done, you're, oh, I've never actually looked at an onion before. I've never actually paid attention to this
And of course,
aspect.
an onion or an orange,
Or an orange, yeah.
they communicate to us through all of our senses.
Exactly.
And what I really liked was this idea. It's not just like staring at an orange, but you say what we behold is what we enter into a love relationship with. So we don't just know that thing, but we're different as a result somehow.
Yeah, we're changed by
How
it.
well
And
we know changed.
you think how impossible that is, because we encounter these things every single day.
Mm.
And yet, if you take the time to pause, they are communicating. They do have something to say, and we are changed by that.
Then we have bewilder, which is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Let's say a little bit about that.
Um, well, for me, it started with Mary of Egypt, and with the idea that she was bewildering to me. I did not understand her. Yet I knew I was drawn to her, and I could never explain why. I couldn't say, I'd never lived as a prostitute, for example, and I certainly didn't live in the fifth century, and I really hadn't spent any time in the desert. So I didn't have a sense of why she spoke to me like that. It was so bewildering. And as I began to spend time with her, I thought the word itself began to break down for me into be and wilder. Wilder, be wilder. I started to see those two things going back and forth. That the path to understanding my connection with her wasn't to figure her out and get her all organized in my brain, but it was to kind of follow her into the wild and see where that led. And so as a practice, am always looking for ways to bewilder myself so that I can see beyond what's just right in front of me. So behold is really about seeing what's right in front of you, but bewilder is this seeing beyond that I feel pretty strongly was Jesus's call to us in the most elemental form. And I talk about this with Jesus's word metanoia, which is we always translate it as repent, which is an interesting enough word. There's lots to do with that. But it doesn't mean that. It means go beyond your mind. And so it like literally translated meta and noia, go beyond your mind. So I think that Jesus is calling us into this world we don't yet know, and this way of being in the world that we don't yet know. And I use the word bewilder for that in this book. How do we get ourselves to a place where we're astonished
Yeah.
by the reality that God is offering us.
I really love that section, and I really learned something from your translation of that word from Jesus. I think you say, "Go beyond what you know," and you also talk about bewildering as a kind of practice of unknowing, which brings together, to mind the classic mystical text, the cloud of unknowing, and this idea, that you can contemplate something, look at it, behold it, but this kind of letting go of what we think we know, letting go of our ego, letting go of our kind of rational mind, to be capable of surprise, of learning something new.
I
And
love this line from Alice Walker where she says, expect nothing, live frugally on surprise.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that because we go in, we usually shape our world through our expectations. I
Mhm.
know what this day is going to look like. I
Right.
know who I'm going to encounter. I know who they are. I know what to expect from them. And there's something nice about that for sure. But that just requires so much unknowing.
Yeah, right, of course. Well, then we come to discern, your last word. So a very Ignatian kind of word, discernment, very important to the spiritual exercises, a kind of way of making decisions. And I felt you were doing something similar in a way, like how the practice about how to turn all the previous invitations into a way of living, or as you say, kind of taking the next step.
Yeah, I felt like it was not such a great idea to leave readers in bewilder. You know, I mean, it's interesting to be bewildered, and it can be totally transformative to be bewildered. But at the same time, I felt like there needs to be another step. How do we carry that into our everyday life? How do we carry that forward? What do we do differently because of it? And so I decided to take on discern. I mean, I'm a big fan of both Ignatius and Henry Nouwen's work on discernment, and I just love discernment. I just think it's so much fun,
Mhm.
just to be in the practice of like asking constantly, where is the will of God? How do I enter into it? How do I interact with it? Or as my spiritual director put it, what are God's preferences
Yeah,
for me
right,
right now?
right.
And I love that phrasing because it makes it reduces the stakes a little bit. I mean, it just sort of, God's on our side and wants us to live
Mhm.
the best possible way we can. And so, how do we discern what that is? And so, for the purposes of the sessions, I went as playful as possible with
Mhm.
discern
Mhm.
because my sense was that if you've opened up to bewilder, if you've kind of opened your mind to new possibilities, then you need a space to sort of play with how those might make how those new meanings or new understandings might make sense in the world. You need some space, and so discernment in the course of this book is about space, making the space to say, what about this? Maybe I'll experiment this way, or maybe God is leading me that way, or what about this possibility? And so it's more about what if than it is about do this now.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a way of kind of listening to our own hearts, in a way, after we've kind of woken them up through all this discovery and bewildering and whatever, and that is one of the way that God speaks to us,
Mhm.
through kind of what attracts us, what makes our hearts burn within us, as disciples on the road to Emmaus said, what on the other hand causes us to feel lethargy and
Yes, exactly.
depression,
Exactly.
but energy, but it energizes us.
Yeah, where is that spark of life and where is it going? And then we're back to the golden thread again, right? Because
Exactly. Yeah.
we're discerning, like, oh, there's aliveness there for me. I'm going to follow that path toward aliveness.
So the second half of the book, you kind of put this all into practice, and that's the part that's not really meant to be read, but really practiced with sort of exercises or sessions, where you apply these various things to a timed kind of project involving often a pen and a paper, and a timer, uh, and the role of journaling. But you introduce also another word that your reflection on that I really liked very much, and that is the image of doors,
Mm.
and what that says to us about the desire for a different life, or the obstacles or things that we experience as obstacles, that may become doorways.
And that speaks directly to this quotation from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who's been like such a mentor for me in this work, especially her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is about the folkloric aspects of the wild woman and how many cultures, different cultures have explored that archetype. But this is her quotation: if you have a deep scar, that is a door. If you have an old, old story, that is a door. If you love the sky and the water so much that you almost cannot bear it, that is a door. If you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is a door.
That's beautiful.
I think she picks up on something that I tried to then elaborate. Okay, well, great. That's so beautiful. And I can feel the ache in my heart and I can feel the longing and I can feel that love, that what Julian of Norwich calls that love longing kind of come into my being as I read that. But then what? You know, where do you actually find these doors in your life? And how do you work with them? How do you walk through? And for me, that was kind of holding the image of Mary of Egypt with me for a very long time before I found a door that I could walk through. So there was this old, old story that I carried with me. I knew it was filling me with some need, some desire, some hope, some something. But it took a really long time before I could open that door and walk through it. But once I did, I began to see all kinds of doors. You know,
Mhm.
there are all kinds of doors to walk through. And I began to explore my own scars and my own wounds and my own loves and see where those things led me. And so there's a beautiful openness to Clarissa Pinkola Estes's invitation because it's found everywhere on our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, in our experiences. It's there everywhere.
Maybe you could tell that story of Saint Mary as she comes to the church with the
Yeah.
pilgrim.
So she's on a kind of odd pilgrimage at this
Yes.
point in her life because her real object, at least as she tells it in the 7th century hagiography that we have from her, I mean, it's not her, it's Saint Sophronius telling her story, but anyway, she says, that she's trying to have sex with as many men as possible on the road. That's her goal. And somehow that leads her by who knows what mechanism to the door of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And
Mhm.
there she is. And everybody is going inside to venerate the true cross. This is during the height of Christian pilgrimage when um, Constantine's mother, Helen, had found the true cross in Jerusalem and rebuilt the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And so she was right there going in to venerate the Holy Cross, and she couldn't get in. She pushed and she shoved and she elbowed people out of the way and she tried to get through the door and the door was closed to her. And she was thrown back alone, she says, into the courtyard of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that is where she has an encounter with Mary, the mother of Jesus. And through that encounter, her whole life is changed. The door to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre opens for her at that point. She's able to go through and venerate the Holy Cross. But it doesn't hardly matter at that point because she's been so transformed that her goals and her desires have been transformed. And that ends up just being a real brief stop along the way as she heads out then to open bigger doors, wider doors, vaster skies. She heads to the life of a hermit.
It's sort of a truism that sometimes a uh, one door in our life closes, and it makes it possible for us to see another door opening. And that was
A radical example of that. That closed
yeah.
door. I mean, it just seems like such a beautiful thing. I mean, I just talked a moment ago about only doors opening, but
Mhm.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Doors closing can be just as powerful and meaningful an experience, and certainly was for Mary of Egypt.
Kind of revelatory. I mean, something that some ambition or something goal that you felt, I have to have this, I have to have this person, I have to have this job, I have to win this award or something like that, and then it doesn't happen, and we think we're on the search for one kind of thing, and it opens up this path, and we discover something else that we didn't know we were looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that we were really looking for, but
Yeah,
we didn't.
right.
because we had this other thing in mind.
I know, and when we find it, then we know that, okay, that's what we were looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it kind of cultivates this other desire inside of us that's new, that's fresh and different. Because usually when we're pursuing some goal single-mindedly for a long time, it becomes stale and old and we stop seeing very, very well. And then when we're awakened to something new and a new door opens and that one closes, it can be really, really provocative for all kinds of new understandings and loves and desires.
I think it says a lot about, vocation. I mean, in my own personal life, there are many examples I could give, but for many years, I was fruitlessly working on a dissertation and getting absolutely nowhere with that. And finally, I decided, what if I just quit? What if I just didn't do this?
What if I just,
And
yeah,
the moment I did that, I had this conception of writing this book about saints that became my book, All Saints, big, great big book. And I just poured out of me in one year.
that's
And
amazing. That's a great
yeah,
story.
so yeah, it was the kind of a thwarting of one kind of conception of where I was going that opened up a whole different thing.
And same thing for me. I mean, in many different paths, but yeah, for me, it was I wanted to have a baby. I
Hmm.
needed to have a child, and it wasn't happening. And I got angry, and I got all kinds of things. Who knows? And I actually finally went to a retreat center with all my anger and my hatred and my, you know, frustration and whatever. And I kind of threw all of this at a God I didn't believe in. This was sort of my own experience. Like I just sort of poured all this out to a God I didn't believe in, and I found Julian of Norwich.
Oh, wow.
And everything changed for me. And
Mhm.
eventually I did have a child,
Mhm.
and he's wonderful, and I'm thrilled to have had him.
You've got to have it all.
But yeah, I got to have it all. But the things that I found upon in that experience of confronting that closed door
Mhm.
were so valuable that, I really can't imagine my life without them. I
Yeah,
mean, it's the start of an intense search and a profound journey.
yeah. Well, I've so enjoyed talking with you since I began by reading the first paragraph of your book. Maybe I could read the last, where you say, daily life with its challenges, encounters, ceaseless invitations is also a door. It's the only place, after all, where we'll eventually find a deeper life, a full life, a sane life. Quoting someone else there, but beautiful circle that you come to in this book, and I just it's a book that's really the book itself is an invitation, as you say. You can provide these kind of exercises, but it's not just a book to read. It's a book to kind of begin your journey, and as you say, over and over again, every pilgrimage begins with the first step. So that's the most
Even if it's
important
just a
one.
step in your imagination, even if
Exactly.
it's just a step here.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I want to thank you, Amy Frykholm, for sharing with us your wonderful book, Journey to the Wild Heart, and
Thank you.
wish you
Thank
very
you.
well. Hope we'll meet again.
All right. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.